Now we're really starting. God says to Moshe, I am God, speak to Paro, everything that I tell you, tell it to Paro. What does he say? I am God. I am, it's worthwhile that you should listen to me. I have the power to send you, and you should do everything that I tell you. And I'm going to do, Kayam, and I'm going to do all the words that I'm going to tell you. Now, this is what I'm going to tell you to say to Paro. These are not just empty threats. I'm the creator of the whole universe, and I'll be able to carry out what I said. Moshe again speaks to God, and he repeats the same thing he's been saying already. When he was in the burning bush, God tried to convince him 7 days and didn't really succeed, because here you see, God says, go into Paro, and Moshe says, listen, Ani Arel, I have a speech impediment. It's hard for me to speak. How is Paro going to listen to me? Vayomer Hashem, this is what Vayomer Hashem Moshe. Moshe says, look, I have made you as a god to Paro, and Aaron will be your prophet. Strange languages. Strange language. What does it mean he's going to be your prophet? Rashi says that it means that he will translate. And also any place where it says a nevuah. What does it mean, nevuah? A person announces something. He announces something that was told to him. This is from Niv Sivasayim. Niv means that it will flow out. Okay, here, we have a little bit of a question. And the question is, this question was asked by Rabbi Sadia Gaon. And he says like this, there are a lot of commandments, a lot of laws regarding prophecy. Regarding prophecy. Prophecy, in a way, is the essence of Judaism, is prophecy. Very rarely does God himself speak to everybody. At Mount Sinai, God tried it. He tried to give the 10 commandments to the Jews, and they just couldn't take it. God spoke the first 2 commandments to the Jews, and they said, God, Moshe, we can't take it. It's too much of a revelation. It's like taking all the Jews into the Holy of Holies. They couldn't take it. And so after that, it all depended on God speaking to Moshe, and then Moshe related everything to the Jewish people directly. True, the Jewish people heard the first 2 commandments, so they knew it was coming from God. It wasn't just Moshe was making it up. So there's a law that a prophet that receives messages from God, he must give the prophecy over. He can't withhold his prophecy. And there's also another law that he has to tell the people directly what he hears. And there's another law that a person that speaks to the people a prophecy that he did not really receive directly from God, and he says, I received this prophecy, then that is punishable with death. It's like making a prophet. Well, a prophet has to be only him and God. God is speaking through his mouth. That's what a prophet is. There's different levels of prophecy. It says Moshe was the most exact prophecy. Every letter that he said was exactly what God wanted. And the other prophecies, Isaiah and Ezekiel and everything, they said in general what God wanted them to say. They said it sort of in their own language. But nevertheless, a prophet has to say what God tells him, and he has to be God's mouth. And a prophet cannot be the mouth of anybody else, or if so, it's not prophecy. So here we have a big question. Moses received the prophecy from God. He had what they said, and Aaron would relate to Paro what Moshe told him. You can't. A prophet can't do that. A prophecy has to be related directly by God to the prophet and directly by the prophet, and say, "This is what I heard from God." It can't be related by anybody else. Unless the prophet said, "This is what Moses told me." But then Moses would be in trouble because God told him a prophecy. He has to say it himself. So what's happening? So the Sadia goes and says, this answers it. It says, "I have made you to be God to Paro. And Aaron, he's your prophet." In other words, you, Moshe, you're in my place. The words you say, you are God. And Aaron is speaking directly the words of God. He heard them directly from you. This, of course, makes no sense because God, of course, is only God. God is not a person. But it says later on in the Torah that this is called Moshe Ish Elokim, is that Moshe was half God and half person. Ish, he was a person, it says, from the lower part of him, and then the natural part, and Elokim was from the upper part. What this means, I mean, we don't know. But on the other hand, we do know that Moshe was the only one that could go up on Mount Sinai. No one else could take the revelation. And it says that Moshe didn't eat or drink for 40 days. And it ended up not to be 40 days. It was 120 days because he had to go up 3 times. So he didn't eat or drink anything for 120 days. It's a lot. Even 2 days is a lot. Even 1 day is a lot. So it says somewhere that Moshe, he was like God. And he spoke the words of God. And if it wasn't written in the Torah, we wouldn't be able to say it because it never happened with anybody else. All the other prophets were normal, prophets. They were people that got the word of God and they spoke. Rashi translates it a little bit different. He says, "You are Elohim to Paro." Elohim means like a judge. The word Elohim can be holy, mean God, but the word Elohim can also mean a judge. It says that if 2 people have a litigation, Elohim yavo devar shnayim, that they have to go to the Elohim, which are judges. So what he says is talking about that not in holy language. Moshe, you are Elohim, means you're the judge, and Aaron, he just translates and he announces what your decision is. You, says God, says you speak all the words that I command you, and Aaron, he will speak to Paro, and he'll send the Jewish people from his land. I will harden the heart of Paro, and I'll make a lot of miracles in the land of Egypt. Okay, here we have a bit of a question. What does it mean God hardens Paro's heart? That's not nice. I mean, doesn't God wants to let the Jews out. So, and he wants Paro to do tshuva. Here we said before that the nations will know that I am God. Here, what do we say? V'yod'u Mitzrayim ki ani Hashem. Well, it's going to be here. Here. Well, where is it? V'yod'u Mitzrayim, that the Egyptians will know that I am God. Where is this? Yeah. Okay, it says, we just read it, I just must have skipped it. It says, V'yod'u Mitzrayim, that ani Hashem. And Egypt will know that I am God. In other words, one of the purposes of the Jewish people being in Egypt is so that the Egyptians will know that there's God. He wants to, right? He wants to. What is this? Okay. There's a sentence, I guess we'll come to it. I'm sorry. And the Egyptians are supposed to know. So why is God hardening Pharaoh's heart for? What does that mean? Why is he hardening his heart? So this is the reason. What does it mean he's hardening his heart? He's giving Pharaoh courage. He's simply strengthening Pharaoh's courage. He's making him who he is. The Pharaoh is not going to back down in front of God. He says, why would he want to do a thing like that? Because if Pharaoh wants to be smart, so he'll say, listen, Moshe, it's too much for me. Even if I can win this war, but I'm losing so many battles. And, we can already see that Moshe, first of all, how did Moshe even get in to talk to Paro? How did he even get in? Right? All the Jewish people are like slaves and they're working hard. And here's Paro just pops up in the middle of Paro's court and he starts ordering Paro around and telling what to do. Right? So God says, listen, I'm going to tell you what, you're going to keep going in there. It's going to be a big miracle how you're going to get in. And I'm going to give Paro courage that he's not going to back down. Why? Because I don't want Paro to become political. And he's going to say, listen, I'll let these Jews out. It's not worth holding them in here in Israel. I'll let them out. But he'll still be evil like he was before. And not only the Jewish people will also say, that maybe maybe we're not really stronger than Paro. Paro just, he just chose the lesser of two evils. And he's powerful and God's powerful, but he decided it's not worth it to make a battle. So God said, don't worry, I'm going to strengthen Paro's heart that he's going to go down to the end. His last abilities that he has, he's going to spend in trying to war against me and against Jews in general, and he's not going to win. And so it is in general. The non-Jews have tried to destroy the Jews every way, thousands of years, and even though they've caused a lot of trouble, but nevertheless, it never seems to work. It always, in the end, and now, God willing, the whole thing is over. God willing, Hashem should help. Says, I will make Paro's heart strong in order that I will make a lot of miracles in the land of Egypt. So here's an interesting thing. It says, Ibn Ezra says, we can ask a question. God made his heart strong. So what's his sin? What did he do wrong? I mean, Paro, let's say Paro really would have liked to have given in, but he didn't. God strengthened his heart. So it's not Paro doing it, it's God doing it, right? The answer is that God gives, I think this is a mistake. God gives wisdom to man, and he puts in his heart intelligence that he can get power from above, and he can decide to do good, or he can decide, a person can decide to do bad. And this is what it says in Parshas Ki Tisa. And the pasuk, Mi eten v'hayo levavam zeh. Moshe said it would only be that you should put in the hearts of the Jews to follow you. So if so, the reason that God made Paro's heart strong was in order to make a lot of miracles. What does it mean? That God was just encouraging Paro, but he wasn't forcing him. He was encouraging him in order that there'll be more and more miracles and that Paro will have more and more reason to decide to do good. And we see that in the end, after all the miracles that God does, he still is stubborn. After he lets the Jews go and he runs after them to try to get them back. Rabbi Yeshua said the reason that he made God's heart is that God wanted to give him a lot, really give him a beating. And Ibn Ezra says, I don't like that answer. I don't agree with that answer. It says, God says to Moshe, go talk to Paro, tell him to lead the Jews out, let the Jews out, but I'm going to harden his heart and they will not listen to you. And I will put my hand on Egypt and I'll take all of my hosts, my people, the Jewish people, out of the land of Israel. So here we have an interesting thing. Or HaChaim, he says, I will take out all of my hosts. He says, why does God use such strange language? Why does he say, I will take out all of my hosts, my people, the Bnei Israel. So he gives an answer like this. Let's see, maybe we can do it inside. He says, we have to understand who are these hosts of God, the armies of God. If they are the Jewish people, so it should have said, I'm going to take out my armies, namely my people, the Jews. Why does it have to say, I will take out my hosts, my armies? And then he says, the Jewish people. He should say, I will take out the Jewish people. They are my armies. So he says like this. First of all, God says in general, I'm taking out all of my armies from Egypt. All of my armies. So you might think all of the armies. Look here, let's see. Ulai, maybe you can say like this. Ki kivan Hashem lirshom b'Torah haflaga maliaso me'alaseinu etzlo. How great we Jewish people are by God. Oh, here, this is the sentence I was looking for, the next one. Because God hasn't got any armies which are special like the Jews. Therefore, if God would have said, I'm taking my armies, the Jewish people out, so you might think that this is my army, but there's a lot of other armies that he also has. But this is one of my armies, and this is one of them. Therefore, it says, Et Sivotai, all of my armies I'm going to take out of Egypt. And then it says, it doesn't say which one, and then afterwards it says, my Jewish people, my people, the Jews. And so there explains, first of all, there's a generality, all of my armies, and then it explains exactly, and who are all of my armies? Only the Jews, only the Jewish people. Those are my armies. Those are the ones that are fighting in this world to reveal me. So from this point on, the Jewish people are going to be called the armies of God. And in the Mimer, maybe we'll see if we'll learn this. And Bati Lagani, we'll see, maybe we'll learn this. It was the last Mimer that was put out by the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, as which is the directions for this whole entire generation. It stresses this. What does it mean that the Jewish people are the armies of God? Only the Jews. What does it mean, the army? The main thing is an army, a soldier is a person who's willing to risk his life for the cause. And that's what Jewish people are, that they're willing to risk their lives. Okay, and the Egyptians will know. This is the sentence I was looking for before. Ki ani Hashem, I am God. And when I put my hand on Egypt and I take them all out from them. And he says, my hand, Yad Mamish. In other words, a real, actual physical hand God is going to put. What type of physical hand does God got? To give them the plagues, the Makos. And Moshe and Aaron did exactly what God said. This is what they did. This is exactly what. And what does it mean that they did what God said? It's so great that they did what God said. Of course they did. Why do you have to have a special sentence to say that? So it says that. Why does it say that Moshe did what they did? Moshe and Aaron. That Moshe and Aaron did what God commanded, and what God commanded, so they did. Says the Orach Chaim. What does you have to repeat it over again? It says that they did. Moshe and Aaron did what God commanded them, so they did. Why does it have to repeat it? So it says, it seems that maybe we can say like this, that they did exactly what God told them in two ways. Number one, that everything that they understood from God, this is what they did. And the second one is, one second, it's my son calling me up. Wants to give me a second. Shmuel, Rebbe Shah, Olo. What rega, ani shnia. Just one second. I want to make a pause here. Okay, Moshe and Aaron, they did exactly what God said. So one thing is they did exactly what they understood. And the second thing is, they had intention in the ultimate truth of what they were doing. In other words, they weren't just doing it to smite Pharoh, to get revenge for the Jews. Or here, let's see. Shiura Kasuv, that's what it tells you. Vayas Moshe kasher tziva V'lo shina davar. He didn't change anything. V'chozer ha'katuv me'id kasher tzivu Hashem, namely what God intended for them to do. That's what they did. What's it mean? They could have decided to let's take the Jews out of Egypt because we want to show who's the strongest. We want to show that God is almighty. We want to show that nobody should mess with the Jews. We want to show that Pharoah is going to have to pay for every penny of what he did. We want to show that our anger and our how do you say, our revenge. These are all good things. This is okay. I mean, the Jews certainly deserved it. They were tortured. But the main reason why God wanted to put these plagues, like it said, so that the world will know what God is. That God is not just this First of all, I read it very beautifully in the Kli Yakar. Well, he explains it later. Kli Yakar, where is that? Here. Here. He explains that the plagues were designed to take out of Pharoah and everyone else's mind, and eventually also the Jews' mind, the main claims that there are, the reasons that there are for not believing in God, right? Not believing in God. Number one, who says there is such a thing? Who says there's such a thing as God? You don't see God, you don't feel good. Feel God. That's number one. Number two, even if there is God, who says he cares? Who says he cares about what's going on? Number two. Number three, even if he does care, maybe he doesn't care about every detail. He cares about every little detail that happens. He cares in a general way. Number three. Number four, even if he does care, even about the specifics, right? Who says he's going to do anything about it? Who says he even wants to do anything about it? So he cares. He's watching. He sees what's going on. Like you have a vigilance camera. And so he sees what's going on. They have these, cameras around. So he sees what's going on, but you can't take care of everything. You know what? And then let's say that God, he really does exist, and he really is observing, and he really is observing all the details, and he really does care. But maybe he hasn't got the power. Maybe he hasn't got the power to take care of everything. You know, he would like to, certainly like to, maybe one or two things he can take care of, but he can't take care of everything. So the Kli Yakar explains the plagues and also Moshe's language when he gives the plagues, how he is coming to contradict each and every one of these reasons for not doing what God wants. Right? The first plague, who says that God exists, who says that God cares, etc. You know, maybe there's more than one God, maybe God hasn't got the power, maybe doesn't care about details. All these are just claims because God made the world in such a way that there would be these questions, right? These are good reasons for not believing in God because God made the world to conceal over him in many, many ways. So he says that's what it means that they did what God said. Not only did they did what God said, but they also did it according to the right intention. In other words, the purpose of the plagues was not just to punish or etc. The purpose of the plagues was to educate the world what God is. That God cares and he is here. God exists and he cares and he's here and he cares about the individual details and he's got the power. That's what it means. They did exactly what he said. Let's do a little bit more. Moshe was 80 years old. Aaron was 83 when they spoke to Pharoah. Okay, there's an Even Ezra, very interesting Even Ezra, and he says, what do we care how old they were? What difference does it make? And so we have a few answers over here. One of them is, let's see the Sforno. We'll go back to this. The Sforno says, Im kol ziknasam, despite the fact of their age, they woke up early and they did the will of their creator. Because usually a person that reaches 80 years old, even back then, kavar avar yamei seva V'higia l'gevuros. He says that when a person reaches 80 years old, he says that a person has already stopped being old and now his power comes back to him. Like it says in the prayer, Yemei shana sana v'shmona shana, but if we're powerful, 80 years. The Rebbe had a beautiful speech about this also. That he said, usually people get to be 80 years old, so they think they're an old man. The Rebbe spoke about this in great length, that he was very against retirement. People retire so they can rest. If you want to change from one job to another, it's different. But as soon as a person doesn't have a job, he doesn't have what to wake up in the morning for, then it's terrible. And the Rebbe says even more. When a person is 80 years old, that says 80 years old, you come to power. So the Rebbe said, you can look and see that people when they're 80, they're not as strong as when they were 30 or 40, 50. Says, right, they don't have strength for things that are not necessary. But when things are necessary, they have the strength. 80 years. And I've seen it over and over again, that people, as soon as they retire, right, just even after a few months, they already start feeling old and they're stooped over and they're, nobody cares about them. They don't care about life anymore as much. 80 years old. So it says, therefore, it comes to tell you that even though they were still, it says Ibn Ezra, that tells you that even though they were old, but their power came back to them. 80 years old, isn't it? Ibn Ezra said, an interesting thing we see, the only prophets whose names are the only real people, especially only prophets whose ages are mentioned are only them. It's mentioned the name, and you don't find this by any of the other prophets that it mentions their age. Only these. Why? Because they were so great and so much more superior than any of the other prophets. Only to them God would speak through this cloud, when it says on Mount Sinai. And a person shouldn't think, well, what about Shmuel Hanavi? Shmuel was also with them. Because it says over there, it says that God spoke to Shmuel, the prophet Shmuel, Samuel, also through a cloud. It says, because we already explained in this place that to these alone God gave the Torah. And through them, were given the Yinchalu Tzaddikim, through Moshe and Aaron, the Tzaddikim also will get their power in the world to come. All the other prophets are also prophets on what's going to be in the future. They're trying to reprove the Jewish people. And Moshe and Aaron, they gave the Torah to the Jewish people. So there's nothing like that. Okay, this I think we're going to have to do tomorrow. Now we're going to see the miracles. Let's just do a couple of them. We're going to, first of all, the first miracle that they do for Paro is totally, seemingly worthless. It wasn't even a plague. It wasn't anything. We'll see. Let's look and see. God spoke to Moshe and Aaron and said, when Paro says, give me a miracle, a sign, Mofet means a sign, right? God spoke to me, the creator of the universe. No, Paro says, give me a sign. Here's a very interesting thing also. I mean, really, what do you want from Paro? What happens? Moshe and Aaron, they come to Paro and they say, okay, let the Jews out. Now, the Jews are the big workforce in Israel, in Egypt. In Egypt, there were according to what it says over here, how many people died in the plague of darkness, etc., there was like 15 million Jews working at hard labor in the 15 million at least that were working at hard labor in Egypt. I don't know what the population of Egypt is, but 15 million is a lot. That's a big workforce. And now Moshe is saying, let them all out, all the people out. So Paro, who are you? How are you? So Moshe said, I represent God, the King of the universe, that he can do anything he wants to. Anyway, so obviously the question Paro is going to ask, I don't understand. You represent God, the King of the universe, right? Yes, he can do anything he wants, right? He can create things, he can make things, he can dissolve things, do anything he wants, yeah? So what are you asking me to let the Jews out for? If God can do anything, so why doesn't he let them out? How am I even involved in this whole thing, Paro could say. Why do you ask? You're asking my opinion. If you're asking my opinion, it means my opinion means something. I say, don't let him out. If it depends on me, don't let him out. If your God is so great, let him do it himself. What do you have to ask me for? So if Paro comes and says to you, I don't understand what you're talking about, Moshe, or this God, he represents is so great, give me a sign. So you can say, to Aaron, take your staff. Now there's an argument here whose staff exactly is being taken, because we don't see that Aaron was told to take a staff. So he says that take the staff means to take Moshe's staff. That's what the Ebenezer said. This is the staff of Moshe that he was given. And here, the Kli Yakar says that it was Aaron's staff, and the Aaron staff becomes a tanin. Now, a tanin, there's different opinions about what this tanin is also. He brings this up. It says sometimes the staff becomes a snake, sometimes it is a tanin. So he says that when the tanin and the nachash is the same thing, a snake is the same thing. And that's what Rashi says. If you look over here, next Rashi, it says it becomes a tanin. What's a tanin? Rashi says a nachash, a snake. Others say, no, that when it's in the water, it's called a tanin. And like a crocodile or something. And when it's outside, it's called a snake. Anyway, it's a pretty scary serpent, whatever the thing is. So if Paro asks for a sign, then take your staff, tell Aaron, take the staff and throw it before Paro, and it will become a snake or a serpent or a crocodile or whatever it's going to become. And okay, so that's the trick you're going to do. So now they're pretty sure of themselves. Moshe and Aaron come to Paro, and they do so, just like God commanded. Aaron threw the staff down in front of Paro and in front of his slaves, his servants, and it became a snake. But we're going to do this tomorrow. And Paro called to his chachamim and the machashvim, and there's also chartumim, we'll see. And they did also the same thing, chartumim Mitzrayim. They did the same exact thing. So you can imagine how bad Moshe and Aaron felt. You know, here they're going to do the stick and they this trick, and they're going to figure at least Paro will be at least a little bit, impressed with what they can do. But he calls all of his soothsayers and his magicians and his sorcerers or whatever, and each one of them throws his staff down. The Ebenezer explains what the difference between Chachamim, these are the stargazers, and the Machashvim, that they can tell what things are going to be, like they're the sort of prophets, and the Chartumim says they know secrets of the future. There's different explanations. One says that they use the angels, and they use devils and spirits. In any case, so Moshe and Aaron threw down their stick, and it became a snake. And Paro called his men, and they did the exact same thing. What did they do? They threw down their sticks, and they became right. They did the same thing. But Yashlichu ish mateu, and they threw down their sticks, and they became snakes. But yiv lamate Aaron et matosam. It says, but afterwards they all reverted back to being staffs, and Aaron's staff swallowed their staffs. They could figure if Aaron's snake swallowed up their snakes, so then okay, that would be sufficient to see who's stronger. But a staff, how is a staff going to the staff hasn't got a mouth. This is that was a miracle within a miracle, that Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs, right? And Aaron's stick swallowed up their sticks. How can a stick swallow? It was a miracle within a miracle. The Alter Rebbe explains in the Tanya, we'll see in Torah Or, we'll see if we learn this, that this whole miracle that Moshe did with the stick didn't show anything. This was not one of the plagues. It had nothing to do with any of it didn't even work on Paro. Paro saw that his men, so his men, they could do the same thing as Aaron, but Aaron's stick swallowed up theirs. It wasn't as shocking and impressing as they thought that it would be. So impressive. So the Alter Rebbe explains that why did God tell Moshe to do this thing? So because he wanted Paro to understand where he was coming from. Paro was called the big snake. He called himself a Tanina Gadol. And Moshe wanted Paro to know where his power was coming from. His power was coming from. That Moshe's staff, which staff represents godliness or spirituality, created the snake. The snake comes from Moshe's spirituality. So you want to say, well, 1 second, the Pharoh's soothsayers and magicians, they did the same thing. They also took their spirituality and made it into snakes. It says, yeah, but in the end, all of it came from Moshe's spirituality. The spirituality of Moshe comes from God, and the spirituality of these others, that just comes from impurity, the side of impurity, which is basically the source of all the other religions in the world and all that. So that is the why this was the first sign. This was like an introduction that Paro was getting from Moshe. Moshe says, now I'm going to show you what's going to happen here, right? I'm going to make all sorts of miracles and plagues. You should know that they all come from the essence of God. And the only reason that I'm doing it is that you should understand and know that God is the creator, and he's creating you, and he's creating your urges, and that you should use your God-given evil urges to do what God wants, not what you want. In other words, turn from evil and do good. That is the whole message of the Jews going out of Egypt and why God sent Moshe to do it. And so it will be in the future when Mashiach will come, and he'll tell us how to use all of our evil and selfish urges in order to save the creator, as we'll continue learning tomorrow morning. Hope to see you at 8:15. Have a good day. Shalom uvracha with Mashiach now.